Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the XTB Management Board, I'm pleased to welcome you to the conference dedicated to a discussion of the preliminary results and a recap of 2024. During today's conference, we will tell you about the financial data, the operational data, as well as the market environment. While discussing the operational portion, the CEO will also reflect on the prospects for the current year, including the product-related prospects. Following the presentation, we anticipate a 20-minute Q&A session. We would invite you to pose your questions using the chat function. We've now put 2024 behind us. During that year, we built the customer base, we expanded the product offering, we've earned record-breaking financial results and operating results. The consolidated net result was 859 million zlotys, which represents growth of nearly 9% year on year. This is the highest net profit in the history of XTB. Something that deserves attention is clearly the fact that over the last 3 years, XTB's net result has been recurring with a very clear growth upward trend. During Q4 alone, net profit was 192 million zlotys, and it would have been higher had we not had record-breaking marketing spend that was incurred in this period. This was 114 million zlotys, and this transferred or converted into bringing in a record-breaking number of new customers in the quarter, some 158,000, while maintaining cost effectiveness expressed as the average cost per customer acquisition. One of the important things that's quite important in terms of XTB's revenue is the volatility on the financial markets and the commodity markets. This affects the investment conduct of our customers, especially that's favorable to XTB if we look at the periods of long and clear trends. As we look at 2024 in terms of volatility, we can say that the first quarter had a very high level of market volatility. Q2 was relatively calm. Q3 and Q4 were normal quarters in terms of the market characterization. This can be seen well if we look at the level of revenue generated in these periods. So in Q1, we generated 555 million zlotys, in Q2 381 million zlotys, in Q3 470 million zlotys, while in Q4 465 million zlotys. So the similarities between Q3 and Q4 can be seen if you look at the trading volume in lots and the profitability per lots. And so these two quarters were quite similar to one another. If we look across 2024, our revenue was 1.873 billion zlotys and was up 16% year on year. As we look at the revenue mix with respect to class of instruments, in 2024, the biggest percentage, so 48%, was held by CFDs based on commodities, and this is a result of the high level of profitability on instruments based on the prices of gold, natural gas, and cacao. So the second most profitable class of asset class was CFD based on the indices, so they represented 33% versus 48% of the revenue mix a year ago. And so CFDs based on the US 100, US 500, as well as the German DAX index. These were the most profitable instruments. 15% of the revenue were CFDs based on currencies. So we had Bitcoin cryptocurrency as well as the dollar-yen currency pair. If we look at the revenue mix itself, it would be worthwhile to mention that its change over time is something quite normal. Our customers see opportunities to earn money looking at market volatility, and they basically trade those instruments in a given period where there is that volatility. So if we look at the costs, the operating expenses in 2024 were 883 million zlotys, and this was up some 27% year on year. This was primarily the consequence of marketing spend being up 29% year on year. The higher marketing costs converted into bringing in a record-breaking number of new customers. That's nearly 500,000 customers, which is a growth of 60% year on year. The priority for 2025 is to continue to grow the customer base as well as building a global brand. That's why we believe that in 2025, the total operating expenses may be at a level higher, maybe up by 40% to what we've observed in 2024, while marketing costs may shoot up by roughly 80%. At the same time, we assume that the average customer acquisition cost should be at the level comparable to what we've seen in 2023 and 2024. As we see the growth in marketing spend, we have also raised our ambitions as a management team in terms of the number of customers we'd like to acquire in 2025. And so we want to have 150 to 250,000 new customers per quarter. That's the minimum plan. I would remind you that last year the range was from 65 to 90,000 new customers. XTB is a company with a very good liquidity position. At the end of 2024, we had 2,052 million zlotys of own cash funds and their equivalents in the form of treasury bonds, as well as other bonds backed by the state treasury, where we invest a portion of our financial funds. In total, these funds accounted for 31% of total assets. Thanks to our very good financial condition, we can be a dividend player and a company, and as a result, we, for years, have been sharing the earnings we've generated with shareholders. Having in mind KNF's position on the dividend policy for brokerage houses from December of last year, we fulfill the criteria to pay out 75% of the profit for 2024 in the form of a dividend, and so we plan to make an official recommendation on this respect after the publication of the annual report in March of this year. Thank you very much, Paweł. So, in terms of operating data, let me begin by saying that our overarching goal, just as I have said many times, is to create the best possible investment app for every single person who would like to manage his or her savings actively and passively. I think that last year we made a very big step towards achieving this goal, adding new products to our offering. So we've added IKE, so the investment retirement account in Poland, ISA in the UK. We've made many improvements to our investment plans, and of course, closer to the end, we introduced the virtual wallet as the multi-currency card. On top of that, what's worthy of being emphasized is that nearly 500,000 new customers joined us, which is a very good result because this represents some 60% growth compared to 2023. What's also important, the number of active customers in XTB has also grown by more than 60%, while the net deposits of our customers have grown by twice as much as in the previous year. What, however, is crucial, and so I'd like to go to the next slide. On top of the products which have already been rolled out, I'd like to make two additional comments. In Q1, we rolled out XTB Social, which was then later retracted, and I would like for you to know that we've already held a meeting with the Polish FSA, and we've agreed to hold another meeting, and it's my hope that this product can be rolled out once again. I would not, however, want to promise you anything, because this hinges upon our talks with the Polish FSA. FSA is working with us very closely, so I do hope that our talks will be fruitful. In addition, in Q3, we also introduced two-factor authentication. These are products we introduced last year. In terms of the subsequent year, which means the current year, in fact, as you can see, the bulk of the product-related changes that transpired in our offering took place in the most recent 2 years. So nothing is changing here. Our plan for the current year is to continue executing the strategy to be the first choice for every European client. So if anybody is thinking about investing in Europe, it is our goal for XTB always to be the first choice. And I think that there's no obstacle whatsoever for us to attain this goal. In terms of the most important products and projects we're thinking about this year, we're talking about implementing options, cryptocurrencies, and of course 2 pension products, IKZE in Poland and PA in France. Additionally, a thing that Pavel already mentioned, we plan to ramp up our marketing spend by some 80% because we must do so if we want to achieve these targets and be the first choice in Europe. We have to strengthen our position practically in every country where we have a foothold. Here we were very pleased to open account number 1 million after some 20 years. I'm convinced that this year we will open up account number 2 million, and I hope, quite honestly, that in subsequent years the pace of growth is something we'll be able to accelerate. And if we're going to be successful in achieving our product-related goals and reaching the highest number of customers, I'm more than convinced that every subsequent million is only going to be a mere matter of time. Pavel, thank you very much, Omar. To wrap up our presentation, before we move on to the Q&A session, I have several tidbits from the trading area for you, ladies and gentlemen. And the top 10 popular instruments amongst our customers in 2024 were as follows: US 100 gold, the German DAX index, the euro-dollar currency pair, the American index US 500 oil, the dollar-yen currency pair, the US 30 index cacao, and the currency pair of British pound and US dollar. The 10 most profitable instruments for XTD were gold, US 100, natural gas, cacao, DAX, Bitcoin, US 500, coffee, dollar-yen currency pair, and silver. As we look at our products and their popularity amongst our customers in 2024, so the biggest popularity was held by equities, 37%, followed by nearly on par were CFD instruments as well as ETF with a 25% share. In 2024 and in 2023, more than 90% of our customers' trading volume was done on the XTB transaction platform, that is XStation, and less than 10% was on the MetaQuad platform. Our customers clearly preferred the mobile app version to the web version. In 2024, 56% of the transactions were done on the mobile XStation and some 36% on the web version. That's more or less it in terms of the trading tidbits. Now I'd like to ask you to take part in the Q&A session. The first question, so perhaps I can respond. Why does the execution of new products take so much time? The number of newly hired persons in the product and technology department is continually growing. Are there efforts being dedicated to current activities? Could you say a little bit about the implementation of new products and steps and what's the most burdensome? What I'd like to mention here is what's very crucial. So all of the people who are in the product and technology department are dealing solely with the products that are very important to our customers. So there are certain areas that are related to payments. These are areas related to artificial intelligence, which will help us in many automation-related processes. So we're talking about product and technology department. This is related to onboarding. So we can say that we're not only talking about the product itself, but also about technology and the automation of our efforts. In our opinion, after making all of these very extensive changes that have been made last year in the product and technology department, so we're pleased with the execution and the rollout of new products, and all of the products that we wanted to implement last year were in fact implemented, rolled out. And so we don't believe that the execution was something that took a long amount of time. Thank you very much. Another question, Pavel? Guidance for 2025 assumes a pretty aggressive cost policy. In reference to costs in 2024, can one expect 1,200 million OPEX with roughly 50% being held by marketing? So if you look at the statistical market volatility and customer activity at a similar level to what we saw in 2023, 2024, would be repeating the net result from the previous 2 years, this would require revenue of 2.2 billion zlotys. Is that something that's possible? That would mean replicating the record-breaking Q1 across 2025. Here the question is about net profit in 2025. So we as a company do not publish financial forecasts, so we cannot speculate about the level of net profit, especially we cannot do that publicly. What I can say at this point in time is that we as a management team are looking at the development of the company on a long-term basis. We're building value for shareholders. The strategy we have been consistently executing for years has produced measurable benefits. And if we look at the results for the most recent 3 years, we can see that it's a recurring result. There's a clear upward trend. So the efforts that we are taking and the ones that we're communicating to you are producing measurable results for the company and for its shareholders. Next question. Omar, I think this is probably a question to you. I think this is a question to me, but let's check that. What sort do you assume is the potential for monetizing new services and products in 2025 nominally? So the share of CFD in revenue continues to be 98% over the prospects of the upcoming quarters. Is it real to drop down to 95%? There are two key aspects that we should mention. The products we introduced in recent years, so the virtual portfolio, equities, ETFs, and investment plans, these are low-margin instruments. So this is not a major surprise to us that the CFD share of revenue is around 98%. Does that mean, from the perspective of these products, that we don't want to increase our revenues? Of course we want to increase our revenues, and that's why we assume that we will grow marketing spend in order to be able to reach the broadest possible group of customers, because if we're going to have many more customers and we're going to be able to reach another 1 million customers more quickly than we did in the past, that means that instruments and products that are less revenue generating will generate more revenue because scale is more important. On the other hand, the products we've mentioned, which are in our plans for this year, options and cryptocurrencies, this is a totally different category of products, and these are products that probably will not be such low margin products as the ones we rolled out in recent years, whose purpose was to reach the broadest group of customers. And of course, cryptocurrencies will probably enjoy extensive interest, and so we cannot assume that options will be as popular as cryptocurrencies, equities, and ETFs. So one of our goals is to introduce these two products in order to diversify revenue in subsequent years. Is this something that will happen this year? No, probably not. But I think that in subsequent years, we'll be able to note that the CFD share of revenue will probably diminish. We cannot forget about the fact that over the last 15 to 17 years of existence of XTB, above all, or exclusively, we were a CFD broker, so this cannot be a surprise to us that CFD continues to account for 98% of our revenue, but as I've mentioned, we are counting on extensive diversification in subsequent years. Next question, I think this is also to you, Omar. Is the client acquisition cost of 700 zlotys, so is a statistical customer that doesn't do CFD transaction, is that customer profitable within a 12 to 24 month from acquisition? Here again we have two important things. First, making or running any type of marketing campaign, as we analyze our customer base, we endeavor to treat this very mathematically. And if we, of course, do have indicators that show us with high probability whether or not or how much we're going to be able to earn on every new customer. And of course, we would not run such a business, we would not conduct such marketing activities if we were to think that the customer acquisition cost would not be exceeded. The next thing is that a certain portion of customers is interested also in CFD instruments, and the next thing is that a certain portion of these customers will probably be interested in high margin products that will be implemented, so meaning cryptocurrencies as well as options. Thank you very much. The next question, which I will address, was sent by Tomasz. What is the percentage of market meeting in 2024? If I look at the revenue structure in Q4 2024, there was a pretty big loss on market meeting of CFD on the index. So if we look at the income structure, revenue structure, broken down by spreads, swaps, commission fees, and market meeting, the company will publish this information at the time of publishing its annual report in March, so we would ask you to exhibit a bit of patience. In terms of the second part of the question, the data we published do not warrant that conclusion, so we're not really sure from where you've deduced this information. The next question posed by Tomasz pertains to M&A processes. So, Omar, so I can respond. Are there any advanced processes of the M&A variety whose finalization could be possible in 2025? No, at this point in time, there are no M&A processes, which does not mean that if any opportunity were to surface, one that would interest us, this does not mean that we would not do it, but to the greatest degree possible, we're focusing on our own development. Here we have to speak openly about one thing. Even if an interesting proposal were to surface, let's remember that this would draw us away from our product and technology plans. So this is always a matter of prioritization. What's the most important thing for us to do? And at the current time, we believe that our own development is the most important, and this will generate the highest return in the long run. The next product-related question, again, I would ask you, Omar, to give a response. Is there a plan to add bleak payments to the e-wallet? Generally speaking, e-wallet was recently added, and you can expect a multitude of changes in the e-wallet. What has been released thus far is the simplest version of e-wallet. We do not want to wait ever, regardless of whether we're talking about e-wallet or any other product, for it to meet all of the requirements of our customers. Generally speaking, first, changes will be made on a quarter-on-quarter basis, and in terms of bleak, we're also thinking about that. It's hard to estimate when this would happen, but I hope that this will happen this year. The next question is probably also to me. Is there a plan on the XStation platform to develop the functionality of market analysis? The idea is to do filters of companies through different criteria, bank tests, something along the scrap tool approach. So in terms of the development of our application, there are two key points. The first point is, what is very important to us is that the platform, in terms of utility, must be strongly improved. So we are now reaching the mass customer, and the backbone of the platform, to some extent, is based on a typical platform for active investments, so as not to scare away customers who join us to invest in equities, ETFs, and take advantage of ICA. We have to concentrate strongly on the UX of the transaction platform, and so this is the first item and our top priority. The second priority is one that we're fully aware that we have a large number of customers who are seasoned investors, highly seasoned investors, and of course we will focus on making sure that our application is capable of fulfilling their expectations, especially in terms of analytical tools or charts. I hope that these type of changes will be introduced this year, but in terms of back tests or robots, it seems to me that this is not our priority for the current year. Thank you very much. The next question is one I will allow myself to address. So we are now at the end of January of the new year. When does the company plan to start doing the share buyback? So a little bit of information about the buyback. The share buyback is being done for the incentive program settlement. According to the assumptions of that incentive program, the variable components of compensation are paid out for the execution or achievement of targets in 2024. So we've now just shared with you our preliminary results. So in principle, the basis for awarding variable components of compensation to persons who have an important influence on the risk profile of the company, this will be the moment when the company publishes its final annual report, and this will take place in March. On that base, the management board, in terms of the directors and the supervisory board for the management board, will make the allocation of the variable components of compensation, and at that point in time, the company will be able to do the buyback in order to settle the incentive program for a given year. So, of course, the company will inform the market about commencing the motivation program, incentive program, in terms of commencing the buyback itself. So I would encourage you to track the company's press releases or reports. So congratulations on achieving new customers. So what is your plan? They're not generating measurable revenue. I understand that you would like to brag a bit, but you're not a CFD broker. So looking at the revenue, and is this merely a PR maneuver? Are you counting on launching this situation, great volatility and encourage and introduce CFDs. First, of course, we'd like to thank you for the congratulations. I know, and I've already responded to this question, of course, that we're earning on other assets besides CFD. And as I've said, this is not a high level of revenue, but we'd like to generate a lot of revenue on our current products. And of course, we'd like to reach the largest number of customers. Of course, as Pavel mentioned, it's our plan to bring in through the door 150 to 210,000 customers per quarter. And so, quite to the contrary, as every year, we want to bring in even more customers. Most of you know that in January, up until 29 January, we have already exceeded 70,000 new customers. So it's my hope, as I've mentioned previously, that we're going to be able to add another 1 million customers, and that means that we're going to be able to generate substantially higher revenue on the low-margin products. Of course, as I've also mentioned previously, this is one of the reasons why we also want to add options and cryptocurrencies for us to be able to generate higher revenue and have diversified revenue. Another element is as follows, and many of you are perfectly aware of this. More than 80% of our customers are executing their first transaction on ETFs, on equities, and on investment plans, which largely shows it's only a matter of time and not whether or not this will happen at all in terms of generating substantially higher revenue on these products. The next question, I think, is also for you, Omar. Why do you not want to become something like Revoluta? Do you believe this competition is too big? No, this is not a matter of competition. What's important in every business, everybody has to define who he is. And our positioning is totally different, while Revolut is aspiring to compete with banks above all. So for them, the primary services are services that are not investment related. For them, investment services are an afterthought, an addition. In our case, having in mind our current motto, XTB where your money works, in our case, our major product are investments. So regardless of whether a given person wants to manage savings actively or passively, this is the primary product of XTB. And we have to stick to our own positioning, because changing who we are too frequently is not something that will serve us. This does not alter, of course, the fact that we would like to add products that are similar to Revolut. And that's why we've added e-wallet and the multi-currency card. That's also why we want to perfect this product. However, in opposition to Revolut, this is an additional element to the offering. So realistically, in our case, we are focusing on investments, while for them that's just something, an additional service. Will plans be added to the virtual wallet, so monthly fees for better conditions, FX currency changes, higher ATM disbursements, as is the case in Revolut? If not, why? I don't have to respond to the second part of the question, because I can confirm, just as I've mentioned previously, the version you see at present is merely the first version. As I mentioned, I hope that from quarter to quarter you will be able to see many more functionalities in our e-wallet. With the benefit of time, how do you see the decision to discontinue efforts to roll out bonds? Why couldn't this be done in parallel with the currency card? It's not possible, generally speaking, in any project to ensure parallel activities. Why is that? Because if somebody's concentrating on one thing, that means that that person's not concentrating on something else. It's always a matter of priorities. We believe the interest we have in the offering is very good, and that's why we reached the conclusion that we do not want to introduce bonds. In terms of IKE, what can be important to you, and I think this is very interesting information, we added IKE to our offering in October of 2024, and our customers have opened nearly 30,000 investment retirement accounts in just one quarter. This shows us immediately how big the interest is in this offering, and I hope that this is merely the beginning. The next question is something I'll try to address. What does volatility look like in January? Is it possible to measure up to the results from Q1 of 2024? XTB, as a public company, and having in mind the regime in which we have to function, well, we cannot give comments on current results that have not yet been published, and so I'll have to leave this question without a response. Of course, this commentary will appear from our side once we share with you in the form of a report the results for Q1. The next question, again, Omar, this is a question for you. So in what base of customers does the company intend to monetize this base, especially in terms of customers not focused to CFD? So these are commissions for trading volume, fees for running accounts, XTF fees, or is this something that can happen in 2026 or maybe at a later period? Once again, I'll respond as before. Our goal in terms of monetization is broken up into two areas. First, clearly larger number of customers will enable us to generate a higher level of revenue, and that's logical. On the other hand, we're adding options and cryptocurrencies in order to be able to focus on high margin products. I see a lot of questions, you're posing a lot of questions about product margins. So the next few questions, Omar, which I will display, will probably pertain to the subject as well. Again, I think we can move on because I've already responded to this question. I don't think there's any sense to continue that, so let's move on to the next question. I think we can go on to the next question. I think here as well. Here, I will respond to that question. Let's remember, and I mentioned this previously, that we, above all, are an investment company, and these areas of our business, like interest rate or e-wallet, are solely an additional element of our offering to make them even more interesting and more attractive. And it's not something to monetize the business. That does not mean that we can't be profitable in these elements of our business, but these are not the elements that we want to focus on in terms of our revenue. From which countries do you plan to achieve the largest number of customers in 2025? Generally speaking, and I think this is interesting also to us, but it's also logical, that the largest number of customers we're generating, where we're the leader or we're amongst the leaders. So if I were to mention several such countries, this would certainly be Poland, Portugal, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania, but also the United Emirates. And honestly, I believe these are the areas that will generate the greatest results. What's also important, very important, we not only want to increase marketing spend this year in order to ramp up the pace of growth in these countries, but we also believe that in France and in Germany we have a sufficiently competitive offering, and our application is already amongst one of the best in those countries, that we would like to fight for having the position of the leader, and we want to be amongst the leaders in these countries. So we want to grow in those countries where we're already in the top or close to the top, but we also have ambitious plans in terms of these two countries. The next question also pertains to customers. So again, Omar, I would ask you to continue. What customer mix do you anticipate in 2025? Will they be as transaction light as in 2024? Are you focusing on a higher margin client? As I mentioned previously, 80% of our new customers execute their first transaction on instruments that are not CFD instruments. That does not mean that in our marketing materials that we want to focus less on CFD. So year to year, we have to develop customers who are entering transactions on CFD. And that's in fact happening. year on year. We have more and more customers executing CFD transactions. And of course, do we want to continue focusing on low margin customers? Clearly, yes, because if we're going to have more customers, then of course the revenue will be higher. So in the second aspect, that if less is happening on low margin instruments, then certain portion of customers would also be interested in CFD instruments, and I hope in the future they would also be interested in options and cryptocurrencies. Are the forecasted marketing spend and the anticipated number of new customers in 2025, does this take into consideration obtaining a license from Brazil in the latter half of the year? So Brazil in the current year will not translate into a large number of new customers, and this also applies to Indonesia. We believe that in Q3 or Q4 we should achieve a license, so that means the business will need some time to get started in order to be able to generate substantial numbers which would affect the summary figures. In terms of Indonesia, we should commence our operations at the end of Q1 or at the beginning of Q2. We should also emphasize here that in Indonesia, for a large portion of 2025, we will offer only ETFs, and equities, CFDs, will be offered in the latter half of the year once we achieve an additional license. So to respond specifically in terms of Brazil and Indonesia, this is something that will translate into business in 2026. And that's why I mentioned that above all, by ramping up marketing spend, we would like to strengthen the position on markets where we're already present. The next question pertains to the dividend. Do you plan to revisit the payment of a dividend in April, at the beginning of May? As we look at this historically, the shareholder meeting usually takes place in April. It's convened in March. The management board presents its proposal in terms of the dividend payout date, and so that ultimately the shareholder meeting makes the decision about this timing. And so we endeavor for the dividend to be paid to the shareholders in the first half of every year, and we will certainly try to maintain this timing. The next question is about the following. When can we anticipate the update of the application, which would be more transparent in terms of an all-in-one product? As the question was posed about the application, I think I responded to that question. In terms of changes being made to the application, this is a much more important goal than the changes related to analytical tools. Of course, the changes will take place in the near future. It seems to me those of you who are using our app see how the wallet has changed, and to a large portion of the market applications, the first screen is what's called home view or home screen, where in our case it's Market Watch. So there will be changes related to that. What's going to be critical here is that we cannot injure our active investors. What's going to be important to us is to make sure that every customer is going to be able to change the investment application, modify it to his or her own needs. We do not want to force people to have a certain view of the application. We want it to be configurable. The next question is about new products. In terms of options, we're talking about the preliminary stage of analysis and preparatory work. When realistically can the offer be extended to include options? Will it take place in 2025 or not until 2026? Here, perhaps with respect to this question, I'll respond to two questions. I'll say a little bit more about options, but also speak about cryptocurrencies. Let me begin with options. Every stage of work, perhaps not every stage of work, but a large portion of new products is broken down into two stages. The first stage, which is 100% dependent upon us, that's the development of a given product, legal analysis, tax analysis, and so on and so forth. When we talk about this stage, I could say, from the point of view of options, and cryptocurrencies, I don't see any reason for us not to be able to roll out this product this year. So everything that depends on us clearly shows that the product and technology department is ready, will be ready to roll out these products, both products this year. There's a second aspect which does not depend on us in terms of options. Insofar as a separate license is not required, the option pricing model has to be accepted by the Polish FSA. And this is something where we have no control whatsoever. And frankly, I hope that we'll be able to do that this year because we're very keen on doing so. In terms of cryptocurrencies, let's remember that a law has to be put in place that will harmonize Polish regulations to the MiCA regulation. If this happens in the near future, then I would be able to respond exactly the same way. So on one hand, we have the law. On the other hand, we have the pricing model for options. To a large extent, this depends when we'll receive the green light for both of these products. But as I mentioned, from the point of view of technology, we are ready to roll out these two products this year. The next question, I think you've already responded to them, Omar, but I will just display them if you would like to address them. Kamil asked about the same thing. I think we can go on to the next question. And so we have another question about options in terms of the Spanish market. Here, I would happily respond to that question because this is a slightly different question. On what markets do you plan to introduce options? Will this be an alternative for CFD in Spain? What are the current results in the Spanish market? Regardless of the country where we operate, we would like to create an all-in-one application. So regardless of whether a given person has an intention to invest actively or passively, we would like to have everything in a single spot, regardless of the country where we function. The only thing that would differ or change would be the time of implementation of the various products, because in some countries we need to secure separate permitting. In terms of the European Union, of course, this distinction doesn't exist, and everything would be rolled out more or less at the same time or very close in time to one another. Of course, we have to roll out these products market by market to see what's happening in production and not just only in the test environment. Will this be an alternative for CFD in Spain? Clearly, yes. These are important products, not only from the point of view of the company in order to diversify revenue, but in order to be able to replace CFD instruments on the market where we have a very strong position realistically, and we'd like to revisit our marketing effigy as soon as possible. And what are our current results on the Spanish market? Well, without drilling into the details, I can tell you that the number of new accounts on the Spanish market is not something that has dramatically diminished. And so this is great information for us. And it's my hope that this is something that will be sustained until we're able to roll out options in cryptocurrencies. So I see that we've completed the 20-minute Q&A session. We're over time. And I see most of the questions are starting to be repeated. And the question continues to appear about how we're going to monetize these customer masses. And I see that Kamal even has posed the same question twice. So, Omar, if you could basically short this topic of monetization up, as well as wrap up the Q&A session. And if you would have any other additional questions, of course, that you can write to us to Investor Relations Department, and then we'll try to address these questions on an ongoing basis. Okay. So can you explain the logic of the statement that you're going to start to earn money on new products when you have a large number of new customers? So if you have 500,000 new customers, is not giving you measurable revenue. So do you need 5 million new customers in order to generate measurable revenue? So if I buy a Snickers in Żabka is not going to earn too much money. But if 5 million people buy a Snickers, then I think Żabka will be very pleased with that, and they'll start to earn a lot of money on that. So in terms of products that are not high margin products, numbers are of enormous importance. But as I've said previously, it's very important for us to roll out options as well as cryptocurrencies, and then subsequent products in subsequent years that will be capable of competing with CFD instruments in terms of the revenue they generate. And of course, the last thing, I've mentioned this several times, let's remember that some of the customers who are coming to us to invest in equities or ETFs, and in particular equities, are also frequently interested in CFD instruments. Thank you very much, Omar. I'd like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your participation in today's results conference. And if there are any questions, I would invite you to contact the company, and you can write to us, to email us to the Investor Relations Department. Thank you once again. Thank you once again very much.